remote tools, and wake on LAN. All right, so this nugget, we're actually going to deviate from some of the more difficult, challenging topics and revert back to a topic that, in a lot of reasons, maybe one of the reasons why you chose to implement Configuration Manager in the first place, and that is the remote tools, or the over-the-shoulder capabilities that come with Configuration Manager. Also available with Configuration Manager now is the ability to do some wake on LAN capabilities, where if you have systems that are in the various sleep states on your LAN, you can actually wake up those systems using what's called a magic packet to have them ready to receive an advertisement, receive a package whenever it comes time for that advertisement to come due. And now in this nugget, we're going to talk about the enabling of the remote tools and also how to set up wake on LAN both on the client and on the network side, and show you really how these tools are used. If you've used the previous versions of SMS before Configuration Manager, you'll find that remote tools is relatively the same. The wake on LAN functionality is a bit different than what you're used to. In this nugget, we'll talk about enabling the remote tools and what you're going to need to do with the client settings and actually enabling those client settings for remote tools, and also the wake on LAN capability on the server side and also again on the client side. We'll talk about using those remote tools and how to leverage wake on LAN inside of your environment. As with all the functionality that we've been enabling over these last series of nuggets, the first thing that we need to do in order to enable remote tools is to verify that its client agent is actually installed and running here inside of client agent. You'll see here under client agents that we have the remote tools client agent. And we've already got the clients installed, we've already got the clients out functioning inside of our environment. It's likely that this remote tools client agent is already enabled for the systems inside of your infrastructure. You'll see here that we have the master toggle switch for remote tools. It says enable remote tools on client. And this checkbox down below actually is very important because what this allows us to do is to prevent the local client, the down at the individual client, from changing the policy that is set up once we've set it up here at the Configuration Manager level. And so this is actually a really good thing because you may have some individuals or some systems in your environment that somehow may have remote tools disabled at the client if this checkbox is not enabled. By checking this box, you actually prevent those local users from restricting your ability to get into those clients to actually assist them with over-the-shoulder sorts of activities. Also here we have a checkbox to ask for permission when an administrator tries to access clients. And checking this box is in a lot of cases going to be an architectural decision on your part. Some environments may be such that you need to ask for permission before you can actually remotely access that client. Other environments, you may not necessarily care. Now, one thing I will tell you, though, is that if you do check this box, if you plan on using Configuration Manager as a tool to allow you to remote, for example, servers, checking this box will require someone to actually be at that server console to accept the remote control. And so you may be interested in unchecking this box if you don't necessarily require that permission, because it just makes things easier for your help desk to be able to remote systems. The same holds true if you have systems that you need to remote control while the user isn't there. If you have a user that, for example, you need to go and solve their problem while they're away, if you have this checkbox checked, they'll need to be around to actually accept your remote tools request for them to be able to use it. So again, checking this box is good because it gives your users the warm fuzzy that you're not looking over their shoulder, but it makes things more difficult for you and your help desk for actually doing those remote control functionality. For clients that are running Windows 2000, we can choose the level of access. Do we want no access or full control? For those that are XP or later, we can choose view only control, full control, or no access. If you choose view only, then you will not be able to interact with the individual client. And so in both cases, if your security policy allows, it's a good idea to actually allow full control so that you can take control of the mouse and keyboard and actually fix the problem. Under the Security tab, we will actually choose which users in our environment are actually permitted to use the Configuration Manager console to remote other users. You'll see here that the permitted viewers is currently set to domain administrators, but if we choose the star button here, we can actually enter in a user or group name that may have that we want to assign access so that they can use remote tools. Again, if you assign that user or group name the ability to use remote tools, they'll be able to use remote tools in both full mode and view only mode. So be aware of what security implications you may have depending on which users and groups may have access to use remote tools. The next tab here talks about notification. When your users are being viewed, when someone's looking over the shoulder of the users, it is a good idea in some cases to provide them some notification, the warm fuzzy, if you will, to let them know that you're actually looking over their shoulder and attempting to work with them. What this assists with is that problem where users never really know if someone's really monitoring them, and users don't like to have to feel like they're constantly under monitoring. If they're aware that a visual indicator may be shown on the taskbar, or perhaps on the desktop, or that a sound will play either as the session begins and ends or repeatedly during the session, that will help them know and give them that warm fuzzy of when someone from the IT department is actually using and looking over their shoulder to make use of remote tools. So be aware again of what is going to work inside of your environment in terms of notification. You'll know that we have remote tools and we also have remote assistance. For those clients that can support remote assistance, we can actually choose those settings here. Those remote assistance settings allow us to configure unsolicited remote assistance settings, meaning where the user is not actually soliciting the assistance or initiating that assistance on their part. We are actually attempting to go to the user to begin the process of looking over their shoulder, as well as the solicited remote attendance settings. And then also down here we have the choice, just like before, of viewing full control, remote viewing, or no access whatsoever associated with remote assistance. For clients that support remote desktop as well, we can configure remote desktop settings that allows permitted users to use remote desktop in addition to remote assistance to actually connect into those systems to make use of those systems and troubleshoot them as they see fit. In the case where we're using remote desktop, if you're familiar with network level authentication, which is the process of requiring an authentication prior to getting a console on those computers, you can actually require network level authentication on those computers running Windows Vista by checking this box. And so you'll see here, these are the settings that are available for us when we want to enable the remote tools client agent on our clients. And like with all the client agents, anytime we make a change, we have to wait for those clients to actually pull down those changes for them to make use of the changes. Once we've actually completed enabling the client agent and those clients have updated their policies, we'll actually be able to use remote tools to manage those remote clients. I'm going to bring up here another server here. This is the DC Nugget. This is the server that is the domain controller for this environment. As you'll see here, we have a blue background and there's really nothing running. And in this example, we're going to show how to use the remote tools to actually remotely manage this desktop. And so we can do that actually by going down to computer management and looking at our level of collections. And if we see here the all systems collection, maybe we want to remote the server DC Nugget. And if you right click the DC Nugget and choose Start, you'll actually see a number of different elements that you can start here for each of the clients that have an agent on them. We can start Resource Explorer, which enumerates information inside of the Configuration Manager database that may be of interest to us. We can view the Windows Event Viewer of that remote system. Here we can see what's going on that remote system from the perspective of the Event Viewer as well. We can also view performance if we want through that location. We can look at Diagnostics and Perfmon as well. One tool that may be of use is this Windows Diagnostics, as it provides, again, another look at the hardware and software resources that are available and currently installed onto that remote machine. These tools may be useful for us for helping identify and track down problems that are happening on that machine. Also, we may want to start either the remote tools, remote assistance, or the remote desktop client, depending on the type of client that we're attempting to connect to. In our case, this is a Windows Server 2003 server, so we're going to attempt to connect via remote assistance. If we click remote assistance, it's going to bring up an instance of the Help and Support Center. This Help and Support Center instance is going to connect to that remote server, and because we have checked the box to require that remote server, to require approval on the part of that remote server, we're actually going to wait for an answer. We're going to wait for that remote server, someone to actually click the box on that remote server for us to be able to use it. If I bring back up the remote server, you'll see that a remote assistance prompt is available and that Nugget Lab/administrator wants to view the screen. If I click here, yes, you'll see that the connection actually occurs between the Configuration Manager server and the DC Nugget server here. We've begun a remote assistance session here between those two servers. Now, if I scroll back, you'll see that within the Configuration Manager server, we're now looking at DC Nugget's window, a DC Nugget's desktop through this little window. Here we can actually put it in message entries, so hello, and they'll show up in the chat history window on the remote system. If we go back to the other system, the other user will be able to respond to those entries. I am having a problem today. And those will appear on both windows as well. So by this mechanism, if we're not necessarily talking to this person over the phone, we can use the chat functionality for the local user to communicate with the remote user as necessary. You'll see that we can send files, we can begin talking, we can choose the settings if we want, or even disconnect. If our user here, however, if our administrator or help desk operator wants to take control of the remote screen, you'll see up here in the upper left a Take Control button. The Take Control button is used when this user wants to actually take control of the mouse and keyboard of the remote system. You'll see here when we click the button that it says Nugget Lab would like to share control of the computer. If I switch back to the DC Nugget, it says we want to help the problem. Do you wish to allow the administrator to share control of your computer? As this user, I can choose yes, and the person that is making use of the Configuration Manager console will now be able to share control of the administrator's computer. If we click OK here, instead of being able to view only that screen, we'll actually be able to manage change on that screen, troubleshoot the problem, fix the problem, and make any changes as necessary. So this is the use of the remote assistance feature for actually looking over the shoulder of those users, triaging their problems, troubleshooting their problems, fixing their problems, and eventually disconnecting from those sessions as necessary to end the remote assistance session. Again, with any of these remote tools functionality, those remote tools, the security or the permissions available to make use of this are going to be done up in the client agent, so that the group or user that is going to be able to use that remote assistance is going to have to be specifically identified in that client agent settings before they'll be able to make use of any of this. Now, the other thing we want to talk about here is the Wake on LAN capability. There are actually 3 areas in which the Wake on LAN functionality have to be enabled, or specific settings have to be made for you to be able to make use of Wake on LAN. The first place we have to make use of it is to actually enable the Wake on LAN functionality within the Configuration Manager. You'll see here, if we right-click on our site and we choose Properties, we'll bring up the properties of the site itself. What we're looking for here is the second tab titled Wake on LAN. This is the master toggle switch for Wake on LAN for this particular site. And once we turn this on, we have the ability of choosing what sort of transmission method that we'll use to send the magic packet or the wake up packets to computers that are on our network. We can choose unicast, or we can choose subnet directed broadcasts. And just like we were discussing before, there are some architectural decisions you'll have to make in terms of how you want to enable this functionality. Subnet directed broadcasts can broadcast to all of the machines on a particular subnet, looking for the machine with a particular MAC address that needs to be woken up. For unicast, we actually have to have the unicast information stored in the ARP cache of the network as that broadcast is simply to be pushed out, or as that wake-up packet is attempted to be pushed out. So there are pros and cons to using both transmission methods as you may need to inside of your environment. We have the advanced button here, which enables some specific properties associated with retries and the maximum transmission packets to be sent, and threads and offset as necessary. You may need to change these based off of your network characteristics. This actually, by checking this box and choosing the transmission method, specifically enables the Wake on LAN capability for Configuration Manager. But in order to actually make this happen, there are a number of changes that have to occur at the client side and also on the network side. If you're making use of those subnet-based transmissions or even those unicast transmissions, any of the capabilities that are required needs to be specifically enabled on the network components themselves. And this is the conversations that you'll need to have with your network administrator so that they will actually make available that the protocols and the ports that are necessary in order to support this functionality on the network. In addition to this, at each individual client are a few settings that need to be had by looking at the properties of the network card itself. And I'm actually going to bring up a Word document here that has a screenshot of the properties of a particular network card. And I bring this up specifically to give you some idea of how these properties will look. But depending on the network card, they may be subtly different between one network card to another. This particular network card we're looking at here is a Broadcom NetExtreme 57XX gigabit controller, and what we're looking for here is the wake up capabilities. You'll see here the value is set to both. This allows us to use both a wake up frame and a magic packet for actually waking up that network card. In addition to this advance, we're also going to need to take a look at the power management capabilities of that card as well. And the power management card capabilities typically look the same from card to card. It's a little different from what you'll see under advance. But what we need to do here is allow the computer to turn off this device to save power, and allow this device to bring the computer out of standby, and allow management stations to bring that computer out of standby as well. What this does is this instructs the network card to be listening for those Wake on LAN packets to be able to recognize that a packet has arrived directed to that client, and so that client needs to wake up to receive the advertisement or whatever thing that we're trying to actually push to that client. So as you can see here, these two elements need to be configured on the individual network card for the machines across your network for them to be able to support the Wake on LAN functionality. The last element we need to take a look at is back here within our Configuration Manager console. As soon as we've set up the elements that we need to in order to make Wake on LAN occur, then we need to set up, well, when do we want to actually wake up our systems? And typically this is done when we have an advertisement that we want to push out to a set of clients. If we go here to software distribution and take a look at the available advertisements that we have set up inside of our infrastructure, here's that Adobe Acrobat Reader package that we're now pushing out to desktops in our environment. If we right click and choose properties of this particular advertisement, you'll see here under schedule that we have a box for enable Wake on LAN. This allows our clients, or instructs our clients, that when the advertisement becomes relevant for that targeted client to enable the use of Wake on LAN to instruct those clients to wake up so they can receive the package on the schedule that we've created. And so this is the last component, is that we need to specifically enable Wake on LAN for an individual advertisement, for that advertisement to actually instruct those clients to wake up in order to receive the package that we're attempting to send. And so this is the third component. This is necessary for us to instruct those clients as necessary. So what have we talked about in this nugget? We've talked about the remote tools capability, and we've also talked about the Wake on LAN capability. Both of these are additional tools that make a configuration manager that much more valuable to you, not only from the ability to look over the shoulder of your users, but also to wake up their systems if they're in various sleep states so that you can push packages to them and push advertisements to them as necessary. We've talked about enabling remote tools and enabling remote on LAN, and we even showed how to use those remote tools so that you can use remote tools and remote assistance as well as remote desktop to work over the shoulder with your clients as necessary. And then lastly, we talked about leveraging that Wake on LAN in your environment and how you can make use of Wake on LAN for particular advertisements to instruct those clients to wake up. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.